Hey, cutie. Welcome back to the podcast. And I say it that way for a reason. Was called the Thought Leader Podcast, brought to you by Thought Leader. We're in the middle of a name change, both for the company and for the podcast. It is not of our own doing. We are rolling with the punches. We are going to make the most out of the situation at hand. We're still trying to figure out what to call the podcasts. We're voting internally as a team. If you want to drop your vote in the comments below, what would you want this podcast to be called? We still aim to talk to leading voices in the realm of health, wealth, and relationships in hopes of reaching other leading voices, other aspiring voices, people that are looking to get a message in their heart, mastery in their mind out to the public, but might need that push. We want to talk to our guests on this podcast, understand their story, understand the lessons they've learned and they want to teach, understand why they decided to get uncomfortable and what the uncomfort was like sitting in it. And today's podcast, it was amazing. We spoke with Jasy Yin. She told me the way to remind it is like JC Penny and like yin yang, right? So Jasy Yin, here's a little bit about Jasy Yin. She is a keynote speaker, a real estate investor, and a women's nurse practitioner. She is a trauma survivor, described as one of the boat people who escaped the Vietnam communist regime. She has been working with women with emotional pain for more than 15 years now. She believes in empowering women who are tired and stressed to find rest in God. Additionally, she believes in empowering women to discover personal strength through entrepreneurship in the real estate network. This can help them accumulate passive income, providing financial freedom and personal autonomy. The story that she has of where she started and what she had to go through to flee Vietnam, to take a boat to China, to then take another boat that was weeks long to Hong Kong, to not be wanted and then be sponsored to come to the United States, and everything that she went through to where she is now is it was humbling. It was awesome to listen to. It was awesome to talk to her. Some of the things we chatted about is like really taking action, because action is what's going to lead to the experiences of our life. And those experiences is what allows us to be a leading voice in our industry. She talks about being a leader, being a thought leader is not one who sits on a throne, but one who chooses to serve. It's passionate servitude we talked about. We talked about the darkness of her past and how she found light in it, how she keeps faith as the foundation to everything that she does. She believes having that bedrock foundation of faith is what overflows into everything else you do as a startup business. The communication you have, the connections you make with both colleagues and potential clients. We talk about how faith allows us to take a step back from the chaos of life and to center ourselves so we can step back into the fire at times. Talks about the power of prayer as well and how that can give us direction to what we want to do. And then sometimes investing in ourselves kind of forces us to take action, forces us into the uncomfort zone so we can bob and weave with it. I hope you really like it. Today's podcast is brought to you by Speaker Mastermind. Speaker Mastermind, over the last 8 years, this company has made it a mission to help its coaching and consulting clients get their authentic message out to the world in hopes of reaching their desired audience through the power of speaking and business building. Over 650 clients of theirs have landed TEDx talks, hundreds more speaking on virtual and physical stages around the world. Speaker Mastermind has perfected the art of delivering a top-tier message. They offer programs to build and scale your own high-ticket program as well, so you can authentically market and sell yourself to your desired target audience. If you have a message, if you have a mastery, if you're looking to get outside your comfort zone and get it out there and you're saying, hey, how can I speak on stage? How can I build this business? There's a bunch of links in the description below. There's free webinars you can watch. There's people on our team you can chat with. Total free breakthrough call. Learn more. Take that step. Subscribe to this. Tell us what you're learning. Comment below. What do you like about the podcast? What are you learning? What do you not like about? Why do you hate me? I can take it. I got thick skin. Put it in the comments below. We appreciate you. And over to me. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast, episode 19. I am your host, Dylan Barr. We talk to people in the realms of health, wealth, relationships on this podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking in the realm of wealth, really getting into entrepreneurism, and then how to bring faith into your entrepreneur journey. Super excited. We're going to be talking to Jasy Yin today, like JC Penny.
Yes.
JC, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Dylan.
Yeah, thank you for being had. You have been one of our biggest supporters of the podcast, and you're in the thought leader space. You're a keynote speaker. So super excited to hear about your journey. It's going to be a wild journey that we're going to hear about, kind of how you came to the United States, where you were growing up, that whole journey. And then once you're here, what you decided to build and what you want to help other women build. So let's start with this question, JC.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
been watching these podcasts. I
Yes.
always ask the same question first. What does it mean to be a thought leader? We're gonna change it up a little bit though,
Yes.
because 18 episodes in now, what I'm starting to realize is it's more than just the thought, right? Like people have thoughts, but I'm hearing people, it's like then acting on it. So not only do you have these thoughts in your mind of women in the entrepreneur path, but also bringing faith in. So I don't want to ask you, what does it mean to be a thought leader? I want to ask you, what does it mean to be a leading voice in the industry and actually get your message out there?
Okay. So let me start out with what is a leader?
Mm-hmm.
Because recently I had listened to John Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
So he used to be a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
but for the longest time he's been a leader, teaching about leadership. And what he talked about leadership really resonate with me.
Mm-hmm.
So being a leader is not somebody who just sit on the top and expecting people to serve him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being a leader is actually a person who give value and to serve, somebody who actually influence others, empower others. So that's what's a leader. And I love that when he said that's just, I just love what he said.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been following him, and I've been looking at his stuff. Now, being a thought leader,
Yeah, or a leading voice. It's like,
a
because
leading
one, it's
voice.
you want to serve, but it's like now you're on podcasts, you're a keynote speaker, you're putting your voice out there. What does it
Yeah,
mean to weave that in?
it means, to me, it means that, having an idea in
Mm,
your mind, you're having a thought, an idea in your head, and something that you're so passionate about, that
mm,
you want to tell the world, to tell everybody about your idea. And then when you add that with your experience and what you're passionate about, and you put that into action, I think it's so huge,
mm.
because I feel like that's where my journey is right now for the last 2 years. That's my journey, is where I just suddenly at 50 years old, I have this passion about this journey. Now I'm just going to put it into action.
I love that because one, you need the experience. I think a lot of times people just have a thought or an idea they're passionate about, but if there's no experience to back it up, it's hard for that to really take root or people to take you seriously. But the big
Yes.
thing that I took from all that is like being a leading voice in the industry is kind of like passionate servitude. Like, hey, it's not just I've done the work, so let me sit up here. It's like, no, I want to keep serving with the
Yes.
work that I've done and the knowledge that I've accumulated. And the way to do that is to speak about it.
Yes.
Oh, because you have a lot of experience, like your life path. I am a storyteller, right? I believe stories shape time, right? And time shapes stories. You have a lot of experience that leads to what you're doing now. So if it's okay, I'd like to begin at the beginning of that
Yes.
story. You did not grow up in the United States. You said for now the first 6 years, that might be hard to remember, but first 6 years you were in Vietnam, in the
Yes.
communist regime Vietnam. So do you recall anything of that time, of what it was like then versus now?
Dylan, every stories I have is from mom and dad.
Mm,
I mean, at 6 years old, I don't remember much, but very briefly in Hong Kong camp, I remember. But
mm,
every stories I got was from what mom throughout the years and what dad told me throughout the years. So when we were in Vietnam, it was during the time when there was the Vietnam War.
mhm,
And Dad would always say every time we hear the alarm sounding, people from the village would be running up the hills into the caves, and we would stay in the caves for days and weeks. Sleeping there in the wet dirt or cooking there. Everybody packed in that caves until it's ready to come out. There would be people who run out of food at that time, and they had to come out and search for food. And Dad would say that some people would not be able, some people would not come back.
Mm.
So they'll take that risk going out to get food, but knowing that they're putting their life in risk.
Wow. So I mean, you're only hearing stories of this,
Yeah,
right? But I mean, these stories are dark as it is. You're going out potentially days, you're leaving, you don't know when you're coming back. You don't
yeah,
know what to pack with you.
yeah,
What seems to be what was the energy or the vibe from your parents? Because you remember this in Hong Kong when you were a bit safer, for lack of a
yeah.
better word. What was
hmm
the energy they would talk about that with?
It's always very Dad always say, God, the time I remember, he would say the time when we had to travel from North Vietnam to China. I
Mhm,
mean, that's a time where we had to get to the boat. But then he would say there were so many people, not just us. There's thousands and thousands of people running from communism.
mhm,
Because at that time, when the North Vietnam took over, when the war was over, people knew that the president there was going to how do you say seek out people who are the betrayer, the people who were not faithful to the Vietnam.
mhm,
They would seek out these people uh, and torture them and capture them, right? So a lot of people were afraid because there was a lot of Vietnamese help the US,
mhm,
was on the US side. So when they heard that, and also the communism all combined, people start running. So we were one of them. We were one of the family. We left, but during that time, Dad always emphasized that the train was so packed with people. People were shoving and pushing, where we almost lost my oldest brother because of that.
mm,
Um, and then we crossed over a really strong current river from Vietnam to China to get to the boat. And then finally, when we got to the boat, my dad was able to buy somebody off to get to the boat. You have to have cash. You have to have something to pay somebody to get a boat.
mhm,
So when we got there was about 15, 20 people in the boat.
mm.
And mom would say, I would ask, well, okay, is there a place to sleep in the boat? How big is the boat? Is there a top over the boat? So mom would say, no, no, there's no top over the boat. So when during the daytime, rain or sun, people will be sleeping under the sky. There's no top. We would be out in the open ocean for like days and weeks. I go, "Where's the toilet?" And mom, "Well, where do people is there a toilet in the boat?" Mom would say, "No, there's no toilet in the boat. If people had to go, they have to go to the back of the boat, stick their butt out, butt naked, and go." And they either had a cloth, just cover themselves, but
Mhm.
that's how they go.
And you said
But,
it's you said
yes.
it's days and weeks on this boat. So I'm trying to forgive my ignorance here, right? But I'm trying to map out this journey for you all.
Yeah,
It's basically where you're at in Vietnam, running to a train, right? Because
yeah,
this new president's like, hey, if you did not back us, we know who you are. It's not going to be a good time for you. Run to this train, take this train to another area of Vietnam, cross a river, which seems like a tough river, and then
yeah,
once you cross the river, it's basically barter or buy your way onto this 15 to 20 person boat.
yeah.
No top. So it's
No.
just an open boat where people
Yeah,
sleep on the boat, people defecate off the boat, or go to the bathroom off the boat, and you're in the open water for days
yes,
to weeks.
yes. Yeah, yeah. So, If you have a motor to the boat, you can go a little faster to your destination, but if you
Mhm,
don't have a tiny motor, you'll be stuck out there for weeks, and you just have to go really slow. Um, but we hear stories that people get sick in the boat, people die in the boat, but luckily nobody died in our boat,
mm,
and there's no illness. But my dad sat right in front of him because during that time there's a lot of boats going out.
mhm,
So right in front of him, there was a boat as big as our boat, completely flip over because my dad said that what they didn't know, what the what do you call it, the captain, the person responsible for the boat, he didn't know that there was a rope that tied to a bar. He didn't release that. So
mm.
when the boat go, the whole boat kind of turned over,
Oh my.
flip over, and everybody died. I go, Dad, how come you guys didn't stop and
Mhm.
help these people? But he's saying this is during the nighttime and there's strong current. Nighttime is really cold, and we have no room in our boat. There's no way to help these people. So he witnessed that.
And right, I mean, I rightfully so is probably the wrong word here, but you have to think of, I finally got here, we need to get away. You know what I mean? It's like it is almost like let's just get out. So as this happens around you, there's only so much you can do. Now,
Yeah.
this boat takes you to China. And you said you were in China. You were in a camp for about 6 months?
So from China, that's where the boat is at,
Mhm.
and from China to Hong Kong.
Got it.
Yeah. So when we got to Hong Kong, there were so many people got there, and according to mom and dad, the people did not want to accept us. They didn't want more people coming to their land
Mhm,
because no, understand this. During this time, there's a lot of people fleeing from Vietnam. Now
mhm.
they're going to Malaysia, they're going to Cambodia, they're going to Philippines. But we were on a boat that went to Hong Kong. So they didn't want any more people coming into their camp. So they
Mm.
were not very happy. But anyway, they did accepted us, and we were in this room. According to dad, we were in the. I briefly remember sleeping in one bed, all of us. And dad confirmed it, and he said we were in this room divided by a curtain, a small
Mm.
little room, one bed per family, divided by a curtain, and that's how everybody lived. Some people stay there for years, but luckily we were able to leave after 6 months because 10 church family sponsors us over to US.
So you had sponsorship here in the US, church family, and we get now we're starting to see the seeds of where faith comes into what you do today. Like you did say, like you vaguely remember. I'm curious, right? Like, where do the memories start to come in from this? It's a, I want to say traumatic, but that is a big, like that's a weighted childhood, right? When do your memories start to come in of that?
Yeah, so vaguely about in Hong Kong, and then vaguely in Hong Kong. Then when we came to US, I start to remember more of my young childhood in US, a lot more in US, where when we first came to US, my parents always working. I always remember mom and dad never home because they always working, minimum jobs, two jobs at once. And so we as kids, there's four of us, and I'm the third child. So we're always out in the street.
Hmm.
Like, we're always in well, I would be out with friends, climbing to people's yard, picking their fruits or stealing their fruits, going to trash can, picking up, cans and bottles, during that time. So it was a time where I don't remember my parents being around a lot.
Yeah, because I mean, they had to work, right? They came here,
Yeah,
they're like, "We need to make it," and that I'm curious of that transition now to the United States, and that's the chapter I wanna get into in just a second, but to tie a bow on that, whether you fully remember everything that happened in Vietnam, China, Hong Kong, or not, you do know that's part of your story, right? So,
yeah.
looking back from that early chapter, what's the biggest takeaway for you in your life today?
The I'm gonna talk about that in a few minutes,
Yeah.
but I felt like what happened in the past in Vietnam with my parents, what they went through in Vietnam really set a stage to how we live in US
Mhm.
because what they went through, they were so traumatized. I feel like my mom, especially my mom, could not. Her culture is the culture how she brought up was so different because my mom. The other story was my mom was never brought up by her parents. She was sold to another family at 6, 7 years old,
Mm,
and for her to escape through all this with my dad, she always had this very negative outlook of life.
mm,
Uh, she had little. She didn't have her parents. Uh, the other side is my father didn't treat her how she want to be treated.
mm,
So all that just she become a woman seeing life very different, very negative, and she went to a different path when she came to US. She went to a different path where we can talk about that,
yeah.
where how she brought us up because she went through a different path.
Yeah, so it's like one, it's like this Vietnam trauma, like growing in the Vietnam, it sticks with you as you come to the States, and your mom having even more coming to that with like this negative outlook. So walk
Yeah,
me through like yes, your parents are gone a lot. Yes, you're
yeah,
picking through garbage to find cans and bottles, right? Or picking
yeah.
fruit, or like you said, stealing fruit. Well, we're not picking it and giving it back. We're picking it and eating it.
Yes.
What was that transition like? Those early years. What was that transition like in the United States? Where were you, and what was the transition like?
Um, See, growing up, even though we had little,
Hmm.
and that transition from there, from Hong Kong to here, because I didn't know much. If you don't know much, then you don't think that you're missing out any or much.
Hmm.
So I grew up I mean, when we came to US, we were in the rough part of Oakland.
Hmm.
So the transition to come to US, I didn't know the language. I so many times I walk to school with my brothers, but when I come home, I feel like I always come home alone for some reason.
Hmm.
And I always hesitant to come home and pass through this particular house because it's from my house to the school is a straight line. And when I come back, I have to pass through this one particular house. And then this house, every time I pass by, there's always these bigger kids, and they would make fun of. They would always call me China China, or
Hmm.
they would talk about my mama,
Hmm.
right? But so there was a day where they knew that I was just ignoring them. When the more I ignore them, the more they chase after me. So
Hmm.
when so they chased after me they got to the front of my house. They start beating me up. And when my mom came out from the balcony on the second floor, they left. But at that moment when, my nose was bleeding and, I was crying, that moment of me looking at my mother on the second floor, I I think at that moment I just couldn't forget that moment where I saw my mother's face and she didn't said anything. She just walked back inside the house.
Hmm.
But at that moment of seeing that she was also helpless,
Hmm.
I felt more helpless and felt even worse just seeing how she felt helpless, that she couldn't help me. So I feel like it was just another day. I walked back into the house, but I felt like it was just another day.
Hmm.
Um, but the bad didn't stop there, growing up in a rough childhood like that.
And with it too, because it's having a matriarch figure with your mom and seeing like as a young kid, seeing what she's went through before even coming to the States, seeing
Yeah.
you go like knowing you're going through the shit, excuse my language, when you're here. And like you said, still kind of seeing that helplessness in your mom.
Yeah.
I know now, like that's all hindsight. I know now it's like you work with women entrepreneurs. It's like you have
Yeah.
chosen to say, hey, this is who I want to work with. This is who I want to help. Do you recall any like stories? Like what was the shift? Because it's a lot of darkness right now. What
Yeah.
was that shift that inspired you? The light that inspired you to say, hey, I want to help women.
Oh, Dylan, there are so many stories that come to that point where I want to help women. It was, for the last 15 years, I've been working with the women's at the women's clinic,
Mm-hmm.
realizing these women don't just come in for a pap smear. They don't just come in for a pelvic pain. A lot of them, the minute they walk in, the minute they sat down, you knew that it wasn't just for a pap smear. It was more than that. But then I have to pick and choose should I open the can of worm? Because once you open the can of worm, you're gonna sit there for some time, and knowing that you're gonna have like 5 patients still sitting there waiting for you to be seen, to be
Mm-hmm.
seen. So there was one particular, well, there's many stories, but I'll choose one. One woman, her name is Maria, and she came in one day. She sat down. She was looking at the floor. She didn't want to have eye contact. And I knew at that moment that there was more for her to come in for her pap smear. So I put my pen down. I look at her and I go, Maria, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to look at me. She was still looking down. And now this time, you know that she was tearing up. So I asked her again, Maria, do you want to talk to me about it? At that moment, that's when she looked at me. I mean, now, by now, tears was like coming down her face. And she said, she had another fight with her husband. And I just kept quiet. And she said, he was yelling at me. I mean, he even slapped me. I fell to the floor. I fell to the floor, but when I fell to the floor, I ran to the kitchen. I picked up a knife. And I still kept quiet. I kept quiet because, man, her story. She said, I held a knife and I looked down at my wrist and I look at him. She said, at that moment, she said, I felt that I didn't care anymore. I didn't care anymore because this is not the first time. And when she was when she was holding onto her knife, she was looking at her wrist. And she said her thought was to slit her wrist right there and then. And just when she was about to do it, she said, my boy came in.
Mm-hmm.
My boy walked in and he said, what are you doing, Mama? At that moment, she just fell to the ground and she just held him. Something like Dylan, something like that. It's just so it's just so deep,
Mm-hmm.
for these women to go through. Because the populations that I deal with, um, they're mostly Hispanic and they need a lot of educations and lack the insurance, So just to hear that type of
Yeah, I appreciate. Thank you for sharing. There's got to be a point of empathy to it, like where you really understand what they're going through. Talking about the past that you've had, hearing what they're going through now. Um, and I am curious of how you now want, like, what is it that you do to help women? Because I do know that you're not only have a background of a nurse practitioner, you also are in real estate, right? So you kind of have like this went through the school system background and then this like entrepreneurial background. What is it
Yeah.
that you do now to help women, specifically women in business?
Well, Dylan, can I go back a little bit of how I got to this space?
Sure.
Um, 10 years ago, well, I was never brought up this way, because my mindset was, uh, I never had a mindset of, entrepreneurship. I never had a mindset of doing big things, because what I went through in the past, my mindset was very limited. My perception of things is very limited. I did not have a vision. I did not have a goal. My mindset back in the days, I always felt that I was not good enough. So when I had the mindset of not good enough, I limit myself.
Hmm.
My friend came up to me and said, "Hey, let's go. Let's be a doctor. Let's, I said, "No, no. I want to be a nurse. I don't think I'm good enough to be a doctor." Going through high school, I always remember just kind of looking down, walking the hallway, always looking down. I didn't want to make eye contact because I'm thinking if people didn't, if they don't, if I don't see them, maybe they don't see me. That was high school. That was high school mindset. So, going to college, I didn't think that I was good enough to be a doctor, which my friend
Mhm.
is a doctor today. And I went into the nursing route because of my mindset.
Hmm.
But not until, Dylan, not until 10 years ago where I became a believer. Once I become a believer, I read God's words every single day. And that's when I realized my worth
Hmm.
and seeing my mind slowly, it's not overnight thing, but slowly my mind changed and understand that my worth, where I can do big things for God, where I can do greater things for Him and through Him. So I think from there, that kind of mindset lead me into the business where I want to create today.
Hmm. What do you feel? Because obviously your faith is big for you. Why do you like? How do you see faith impacting, someone that's out there that's looking to build their business?
Yeah, I believe that having faith in general in all aspect of life is big. It's
Mhm.
big. It's not just business, because you have to have God in the center of your marriage. You
Hmm.
have to have God in the center of your family. You have to have God in the center of all relationships. So business is just a small part of it to have God. Because imagine building up a business. You know how hard that is? The hurdles that you have to jump through, standing back up from all the mistakes that you go through, all the daily grind that you have to,
Mhm.
persevere. So building a business um, is hard. So, and you need God in that. You need His wisdom in that.
Hmm.
You need His guidance in that, right? And the other part is when you be able to have a successful business, you really need to have that foundation, that relationship with your staff, with the clients. You have to have that kind of good ethical conduct and integrity in your business, because that's the foundation of it all. If you don't have that serving mindset, if you don't have that mindset of giving values, then what kind of business is it?
Mhm.
So that's why I think having faith, and to me personally, having faith means believing in Christ, and His command is to serve others.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing here is like having a faith as your foundation, like taking the time to have faith in your connection with God as a foundation is what's going to overflow into everything else you do. right? That
Yes.
wisdom, that guidance is going to overflow into the communication that you're having, the
Yes.
conversations that you're having, whether with a potential client or whether with a colleague. You also
Yes.
talk about, because I have walked myself the entrepreneurial path, right? And you talk about like it can be a grind sometimes. It can feel
Yes.
like a burnout sometimes. It can feel compulsive sometimes.
Yes.
So for you, you talk about finding rest in God. What do you mean by like finding rest in God in the entrepreneurial path?
Yeah. Because Dylan, when I see the women that I work with, and also myself,
Mhm.
my life, what I have to go through, how do you find rest? How do you find rest with the women and with myself? Many times, I felt like every other woman I talked to in the clinic, I felt like somebody have some kind of cancer. Every other patient I talk to, some kind of cancer they go through.
Mhm.
If it's not cancer, they have to go through um, their husband cheating on them,
Mhm.
or they have to go through some kind of abuse, or they have to go through their children are mistreating them. So the struggles that we have to go through in life, I feel like dealing that when you and we're breathing, as long as we're breathing, we have some kind of issues and
Mhm.
problems going on. It just never stop.
Mhm.
It never stop. So Dylan, I pray with them. I always I always ask them, let's pray. When we pray, that's when I'm able to um, show them, let them know who God is. Because God creates us. God creates us, and His intention for all of us was to walk with Him. Every one of us, His intention was for us to walk with Him. So
Mhm.
why would you want to go through life alone with all these struggles and problems? Why would you choose to walk life alone instead of walking with Him?
Yeah, what I'm hearing here too is like you're talking of faith as like let's take a step back. Like we're in the hustle and we're in the chaos of life, no matter what that is that we're going through. It could be cancer, it could be
Mhm.
going through divorce, could be going through infidelity, could be going through the hustle and bustle of a business,
Yeah,
and we're in it and it's chaotic sometimes. For you, faith is taking that step back, take that deep breath, to walk like you say walk with God so
yeah,
we can then step back into it on the right foot.
yeah,
Like with your story and all the dark that someone could see, and you being able to find the light in it has been it's an amazing story. Now, I have a couple of final questions. I
yeah,
want one more on entrepreneurship, and then I want to talk about the comfort zone, right? There could be a potential entrepreneur out there, a potential female entrepreneur out there, a
yeah,
potential female faith-based entrepreneur out there that wants to get started. What do you think is that first step for the faith-based entrepreneur? You're like, I have an idea. I'm looking to put myself out there. What do you really feel is that first step they should take to begin that journey?
yeah. Good question, Dylan.
I'm full
Because
of them.
ah, I have so much to say, but
Yeah.
we have a limited time, so I
Mhm.
have so many stories. But I have a friend. I met her in one of the conference. It's a real estate conference,
Mhm.
and I met her there about a year ago. She came to me and she said, I don't know where to start, but I know I want to go into real estate business. I don't know where to start. Can you help me? So the first thing I talked to her about is I s- um I'm just thinking, should I say her name? Okay, I'm not gonna say her name. I'll just use I'll just
Sheila.
use
Sheila.
Sheila. Here we go. Sheila. Sheila came to me and she said, how should I start? Where should I start? The first thing I said, Dylan, is Sheila, I need you to pray about it first.
Hmm.
I need you to pray to see what directions God's going to give you. Because everybody has a purpose in life, and that purpose is given by God. So you need to pray, keep on praying to see what direction God gives you. And once you finish praying, come back to me. I can walk you through how to start this real estate business, because I went through it, where to start. I went through the grind. I went through, I had to do a lot of research how to get to a certain area.
Mhm.
So I'm willing to guide her and lead her, but first I want her to pray about it first.
Hmm.
And if this is what if she really wanted this route, then I'm willing to guide her
Hmm.
through from A to Z.
Yeah, so for you, it is coming back to your faith. It's coming back to prayer. Being the first step is like prayer to get that direction. And this is, I think it's a perfect segue to the last question. I know you have a lot of stories you could tell, but I want to finish with, let's say someone does get the direction. Like I love talking about the uncomfortable aspect of the journey. And from what I'm hearing from your story, you've had a bunch of uncomfortable times. Everything's not glitz and glamour at the end. You had to go through the shit to be able
Yeah.
to be where you're at now, right? So someone prays, someone like really feels they're getting that direction from God,
Yeah.
and they're getting ready to take that first step. That first step is going to be uncomfortable. What is your message, or what would you want to tell someone they're on the precipice of comfort and uncomfort? What would you want to tell them just to push through that comfort threshold and get uncomfortable with what they want to do?
It all comes down to action.
Hmm.
You can go through so many conferences, you can read a tons of books about mindset, about, bettering yourself, about real estates and everything, or you can, you know, but it all comes down to actions.
Hmm.
It all comes down to taking the first step, even though it's a little step, a small step. Just do it. Just take it.
Hmm.
I mean, going back when I first started, yes, I started out with reading books. I started out with, listening to different podcasts and doing some research about different real estates, because in real estate there's different part of real estate. I mean, how do I start? So, but I pick a program.
Hmm.
First, I pick a program where I want to be educated from, and I'm willing to pay the money for it. Sometimes I feel like if you put that cost, that finance part of it, I feel like that kind of give you that extra push to,
Hmm.
you better go through with it, because you just paid that 40K for it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so that was the beginning of it, where we decide to invest in ourselves. I see it as it's a tuition where I pay for college, a 40K into this program,
yeah.
and we did. And because of that, that's where we start.
Yeah.
I think that's the beginning of it, is put yourself out there, take that action, put yourself into find a mentor. I
Mm.
think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it almost it pushes you into the uncomfort. It's like, yo, we did this. It's time to get going. Almost like sometimes we need that a little bit of external pressure.
Yes.
Jasy Yin, Jasy like Penny, Yin like Yang. It has been so fun chatting with you today. I have learned a bunch. If you see me looking down, it is all the notes that I took, and it actually starts with the action that people need to take is what builds their experience, right? Because like you said, you cannot be a leading voice in the industry without that experience. And once you're a leader, you talk about the importance of passionate servitude. Leader is not someone that just sits on a throne and lets other people do stuff for them. It's a person that puts themselves out there and wants to serve with it. We talked about the trauma of your past setting the stage. We talked about, even though there's a bunch of darkness, choosing to see the light so you can continue to step forward and help other people that are stuck in the darkness. We talked about keeping faith the foundation of everything you do, because it will start to overflow into every conversation and interaction and connection you make along the way. We talked about how faith allows you to take a step back from the chaos at times, where you can rest in God, as you say. And when you do feel called to do something, you start to have that itch. You say, lean into prayer, see what God has for you, And then again, that comes all the way back to the beginning of then take action. And sometimes that is investing in yourself to give yourself the push. Jasy Yin, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for me and for all of our listeners out there. Let us know what you thought of today's podcast. Drop a like, drop a comment, tell us what you've learned. Let other people know about this. We will see you next week. Keep pushing, keep getting outside your comfort zone. And finally, one last time, Jasy Yin, thank you for spreading your wisdom.
Dylan, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Take care.